Now we're going to take a look at managing data within our app using the Firestore database. So we'll head back to our Firebase console and click on the database resource, and we should be taken to our Firestore interface. The great thing about Firestore and Firebase databases in general is that there's not too many concepts that you need to know beforehand in order to get started working with it. One thing that's important to understand is that any Firestore database is a NoSQL database, meaning it's only structured in the way that we choose it to be. We can provide basically whatever types of data, whatever set of data that we want to store in our database. It doesn't constrain you in any way that a relational database would, a SQL database. Another key concept of working with Firestore databases in particular is that they consist primarily of what's known as collections of data, and collections, as the name implies, serve as sets of data. So for example, we're going to have a collection of data that is dedicated to user data. So we can go in, if we click on Add Collection, we can go in and provide a collection ID called users. We can hit Next. So collections are composed of individual documents. Collections can have as many documents as you want. There's no limit to the number of documents that we can store in a collection. And note that collections are optimized to find documents according to different criteria that we can set, but we'll cover that when we take a look at queries in a little bit. And the way that collections are linked to individual documents, say we have a users collection and we want to store the currently authenticated user in our database, how do we go about doing that? Well, first of all, we would link the users collection to an individual document by an ID. We can either provide our own ID or we can allow Firestore to create its own automatic ID. So to do that, we'll click on this Auto ID. So we have this unique string linked to our document, which, as I mentioned, can consist of whatever set of data that we'd like to append to it. So this is just an example, but say for each user, we wanted to provide a username. Well, we'd then provide a field on our document with the name username. We can set its type. Since this is going to be expressed as a name, this would be of type string. If we click on this select, we see that there's a bunch of different options that we can choose. And since we're adding documents manually at this point, we can add a value. So I'll just provide some username. Then for the next field, we can click on Add Field, and we might want to store some information about whether a user is an administrator or not. So we might have a field called isAdmin. And in this case, instead of having it be a string, it would be a Boolean, either true or false. So let's say that it's true. And then we have another field. And let's say for another field, we are keeping track of the user's post count, how many posts they've created. So we'll provide that field name, and then for the type, we would store that as a number and say the user had made 2 posts. When we're done making this user and selecting any number of fields that we want, and note that you can remove them with this cancel icon, we can hit save. And so now we can see the structure of how our documents and collections are going to be changed and structured within our Firestore database. We have our users collection here, which is linked to a document by its ID. That document consists of a number of fields, which we can structure however we like. We can add more dynamically, we can add documents dynamically, and using this button in the top right hand corner, we can delete documents or delete document fields if we want. But one more important thing to note about how collections and documents are structured is that we don't have to just have a single set of collections at the top level, which are composed of a number of documents. We can continue to nest collections within documents. Note that documents can't be linked to other documents, except, for example, by storing their ID as a given field, but we can add collections to documents, so we can continue this nesting structure of collection, document, collection, document. So say on each piece of user data we wanted to store their posts, say with a collection ID of posts, where again we needed to generate a document ID, and then say for each post we had a title, which is a string, as well as some body content, etc. So if we save this, we can see the complete structure here. Note that we have these breadcrumbs up at the top, so we can easily traverse this tree And if you want to go back just to the top level, you can click on the home button and navigate through your collection however you like. So I'm going to delete this post collection on our user, and I'll do that by selecting delete collection on posts. But we're going to keep our user data, and I'm going to add one more document here, another user. So I'll create an ID. The field was username. So I'll create another user with a username as well as an isAdmin value, which I'll set to false, and post count will be the number 3. And we'll save that. And in the next video, we'll take a look at how to read from our Firestore database and how to get both of these users that we've added to our users collection.